Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what is Vegeta was born in a world with different power system instead of Saiyan transformation. Subscribe if you enjoy the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. The twin sons of planet Vegeta hung low on the horizon, casting the royal palace in shades of deep amber and blood red. It was the kind of sunset that poets might have written about, had Saiyans cared for poetry. They didn't. Saiyans cared for strength, for battle, for the primal thrill of conquest that ran through their veins like molten iron. In the vast training grounds beneath the palace's eastern wing, the air shimmered with heat. Not the natural warmth of the dying day, but something far more intense. The residual energy of Crimson Ki, lingering like smoke after cannon fire. Prince Vegeta stood in the center of the scorched arena, his small chest heaving with exertion. At 5 years old, he barely reached the waist of the training automatons that lay scattered around him in various states of destruction. Sparks sputtered from severed wiring. Melted metal pulled on the stone floor. The acrid smell of burned circuitry mixed with something else. Something that made the handful of observers shift uncomfortably in the viewing gallery above. The smell of fear. Again, Vegeta commanded, his voice high and thin but carrying an authority that seemed unnatural for a child. His black hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and his training armor, a miniature version of the Saiyan battle suit, bore scorch marks that hadn't been there an hour ago. The royal engineer, a nervous Saiyan named Kaba, exchanged glances with the combat instructor, Master Paragus. Both men had seen countless warriors train in these halls over the decades. Neither had seen anything quite like this. Your Highness, Kaba ventured carefully, perhaps we should, I said again. Vegeta's eyes, black as obsidian and just as hard, fixed on the engineer. Unless you doubt your prince's stamina? It wasn't really a question. Kaba swallowed and nodded to his assistants. They activated another training automaton, this one newer, more advanced, programmed with combat algorithms from a dozen conquered worlds. It rose from its charging station with a pneumatic hiss, photoreceptors glowing a predatory yellow. Vegeta rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar heat beginning to build in his core. This was what separated Saiyans from every other species in the universe. Not their tail, though that certainly helped with balance. Not their natural aggression, though that served them well in battle. No, it was the Crimson Ki, the ancient power that had transformed their ancestors from simple primates into the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The automaton lunged. Vegeta didn't move until the last possible second. His body shifted with practiced efficiency, and he drove his small fist into the machine's midsection. The impact should have been negligible, a child's punch against military-grade alloy. But Vegeta's fist burned with crimson light, and the metal buckled like paper. The automaton staggered backward, servo motors screaming in protest. Tier 1, Master Paragus murmured from the gallery, making notes on his data pad. Clean manifestation. Remarkable control for his age. But he spoke too soon. Vegeta pressed his advantage, launching a flurry of strikes that left glowing trails in the air. Each impact sent small explosions of red energy rippling across the automaton's frame. His movements grew faster, more aggressive, and that internal heat, that beautiful, terrible heat, began to surge beyond his control. The Crimson Ki wasn't just energy. It was emotion given form, willpower made manifest. For most Saiyan children, it first appeared as small sparks during moments of extreme stress or anger, the Tier 1 manifestation known as Red Spark. They would spend years, sometimes decades, learning to fan those sparks into steady flames. Vegeta had been different from the start. The automaton managed to catch his wrist mid-strike. Its grip was crushing, designed to subdue adult warriors. Vegeta felt bones creak under the pressure, and something inside him snapped, not his bones, but some internal restraint he didn't even know he possessed. Pain became fuel. Frustration became fire. The crimson light around his fist intensified, deepening to a scarlet so bright it hurt to look at directly. The temperature in the training hall spiked 20 degrees in as many seconds. In the gallery, Master Paragus gripped the railing and leaned forward, his data pad forgotten. Impossible, he breathed. That's, Vegeta screamed. Not in pain, but in defiance. The crimson aura exploded outward from his body, engulfing him in flames that somehow didn't burn his flesh. This was Tier 2, Scarlet Blaze, a level of power that elite soldiers trained their entire lives to achieve. The royal physicians had projected that Vegeta might reach it by age 12, perhaps 10 if he was truly exceptional. He was 5. The automaton's grip loosened as its hand began to melt. Vegeta tore free and drove both fists forward in a double palm strike. The concentrated crimson ki erupted from his hands like a battering ram of pure force. The automaton didn't just break, it disintegrated, its component parts scattering across the arena in a shower of molten debris. Then Vegeta collapsed. The crimson flames guttered and died. The prince crumpled to his knees, gasping, every muscle in his small body screaming in protest. Reaching Tier 2 was one thing. Maintaining it was entirely another. He'd held it for perhaps 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds had drained him more thoroughly than the previous hour of combat. Master Paragus was beside him in an instant, moving with surprising speed for a man of his years. He knelt, one hand hovering near the prince's shoulder but not quite touching. One did not presume to lay hands on royalty without permission. Your Highness, that was extraordinary. But you must not push yourself so hard. The Crimson Ki is fueled by emotion, yes, but uncontrolled emotion will consume you from within. Many promising warriors have burned themselves out by, I know the lessons, old man. Vegeta's voice was hoarse, but his eyes had lost none of their intensity. My father reached Tier 4 by age 25. I will surpass him by 15. Paragus said nothing. What could he say? The prince's ambition was as vast as his talent, and trying to temper either would be like trying to hold back one of planet Vegeta's crimson oceans with cupped hands. Instead, he helped the boy to his feet and escorted him toward the recovery chambers. Vegeta walked with his spine straight despite his exhaustion, refusing to show even a hint of weakness. Already, at 5 years old, he understood that perception was as important as reality when you wore a crown. The royal palace was a monument to Saiyan conquest, built from the bones of 100 defeated civilizations. Its walls were lined with trophies, weapons, armor, banners, all taken from worlds that had fallen before the Saiyan Empire's might. The corridors echoed with the heavy footfalls of guards, each one a warrior who had proven themselves in countless battles. Vegeta walked these halls like he owned them. Because he did, or would someday. The king requests your presence in the throne room, Your Highness, a guard informed him as he emerged from the recovery chamber. The healing tanks had worked their magic, restoring his depleted energy reserves and repairing the minor damage his body had sustained. His muscles still ached with that pleasant soreness that came from pushing one's limits, but he could walk without difficulty. Then I shall not keep him waiting, Vegeta replied, adjusting his armor. It bore fresh scorch marks from the training session, badges of honor he wore proudly. The throne room was the heart of the palace, a vast space that could hold thousands when the king called his warriors to assembly. Today it was nearly empty, occupied only by King Vegeta himself, seated upon the crimson throne that had been carved from a single massive ruby extracted from the planet's core. The throne pulsed with a faint inner light, resonating with the king's own powerful ki. King Vegeta was everything his son aspired to be. Tall, powerfully built, with the same sharp features and penetrating gaze that young Vegeta was still growing into. But what truly set the king apart was his aura. Even at rest, even with his power carefully controlled, the air around him shimmered with barely contained energy. This was a man who had achieved Tier 4, the legendary Ruby Tempest, a level of power so intense that his ki took on physical weight, pressing down on those around him like an invisible hand. Father. Vegeta approached the throne and dropped to one knee, fist over heart in the traditional Saiyan salute. Protocol demanded it, even in private audiences. Rise, my son. The king's voice was deep, carrying the weight of absolute authority. I watched your training session. Of course he had. King Vegeta made it his business to monitor his heir's progress personally. The future of their race rested on those small shoulders, after all. I trust it met your expectations? Vegeta kept his tone neutral, but inside his chest, his heart hammered. His father's approval meant everything. It exceeded them. The king descended from his throne, and Vegeta had to crane his neck to meet his eyes. Tier 2 at age 5. There hasn't been a Saiyan with such prodigious talent in 10 generations, perhaps longer. Pride swelled in Vegeta's chest, threatening to burst free. But he kept his expression carefully neutral. A prince did not preen like a common soldier receiving his first commendation. Master Paragus believes I push too hard, Vegeta said. He worries about burnout. Paragus is wise to be cautious. I have seen warriors cripple themselves chasing power too quickly, their bodies unable to contain the ki they generate. The king walked to one of the great windows that overlooked the city below. Lights were beginning to appear as the twin suns set fully, thousands upon thousands of them, each one representing Saiyan families, Saiyan warriors, all depending on their king's strength to keep them safe and prosperous. However, King Vegeta continued, caution must be balanced against ambition. We live in dangerous times, Vegeta. The universe is not kind to the weak, and we Saiyans have made many enemies through our conquests. If you are to lead our people someday, you must be stronger than I am. Much stronger. Something in his father's tone made Vegeta's spine stiffen. There was an undercurrent there, a tension he didn't fully understand. Is something wrong, father? King Vegeta was silent for a long moment, staring out at his kingdom. When he spoke, his words were measured, careful. Have you heard of Lord Frieza? The name was familiar, though Vegeta couldn't quite place it. The arms dealer? The one who sells weapons to planets we're conquering, among other things. The king's jaw tightened. Frieza is a businessman, in his own words. He controls a vast empire, trading in weapons, technology, and conquered worlds. For years, we've had a mutually beneficial relationship. We conquer planets, he sells them to the highest bidder. Everyone profits. That doesn't sound concerning, Vegeta said, though his father's body language suggested otherwise. It isn't, so long as the relationship remains balanced. But recently, Frieza has been making suggestions about the direction of our conquests, about the allocation of resources, about the independence of the Saiyan race. The king's hands clenched into fists, and for just a moment, crimson light flickered around them before he forced it down. He forgets that Saiyans bow to no one. Vegeta felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Even at 5 years old, he understood the implications. He wants to control us. He wants to own us. King Vegeta turned from the window, and his expression was harder than Vegeta had ever seen it. And that can never happen. We are Saiyans. We are warriors. We are free. No tyrant, no matter how powerful, will put chains on my people. The conviction in his father's voice stirred something in Vegeta's chest. This was what it meant to be king, to stand against threats not with fear, but with absolute certainty of purpose. What are we going to do? Vegeta asked. We are going to become stronger. Strong enough that Frieza thinks twice before making demands. Strong enough that he remembers who the true warriors of this universe are. The king placed a heavy hand on his son's shoulder. And you, my son, are going to help me do it. How? By fulfilling your potential. By reaching heights no Saiyan has reached before. King Vegeta's eyes glowed with an inner fire. We have legends, Vegeta. Stories passed down from the ancient days, before we even knew other planets existed. Stories of Saiyans whose crimson ki burned so hot that it transcended red entirely, turning black as the void between stars. They called it Tier 5. The obsidian flame. No one alive has ever witnessed it. Most believe it's just a myth. But you don't, Vegeta said, understanding dawning. I don't know if it's real. But I know that we need every advantage we can get. So you will train. You will grow. You will push yourself to limits that would break lesser warriors. And perhaps, just perhaps, you will discover whether those old legends hold any truth. The weight of that expectation should have been crushing. Instead, Vegeta felt energized, purpose flowing through him like electricity. This was his destiny, not just to rule, but to transcend, to become something greater than any Saiyan had ever been. I won't fail you, father, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. King Vegeta smiled, and for just a moment, the stern warrior king was simply a father, proud of his remarkable son. I know you won't. Now come, your mother wants to see you before the evening meal. And try not to tell her about destroying 3 training automatons in one session. She worries enough as it is. Queen Rosakina's chambers were a stark contrast to the austere martial atmosphere that dominated the rest of the palace. Here, tapestries from a dozen worlds softened the stone walls. Cushions imported from planets with names Vegeta couldn't pronounce provided comfortable seating. Even the lighting was gentler, coming from bioluminescent plants rather than harsh electric fixtures. Vegeta's mother sat by the window, reviewing reports on a data pad. She was smaller than most Saiyan women, built more for speed than raw power, but there was steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. She'd been a formidable warrior in her youth, reaching Tier 2 before she'd set aside active combat to focus on the political and administrative aspects of ruling an empire. "My little prince," she said, setting aside her work as Vegeta entered. Her smile was warm, genuine, so different from the calculated expressions he saw on courtiers and visiting dignitaries. "I heard you had quite the training session today." "News travels fast," Vegeta muttered, but he allowed her to pull him into an embrace. With her, he could afford to let his guard down slightly. She was one of the few people in the universe who saw him as something more than a weapon in development. "When my son reaches Tier 2 at age 5, breaking records that stood for centuries?" "Yes, news travels fast." She held him at arm's length, studying his face. "Are you hurt? Be honest. The healing tanks took care of everything, mother." "I'm fine. Physically, perhaps." Her gaze was knowing. "But pushing your ki that hard, that young, Vegeta, the Crimson Ki is fueled by emotion. Every time you reach for it, you're channeling anger, pride, aggression. Those are powerful fuels, but they exact a price on the spirit." Vegeta pulled away slightly, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Father says I need to become stronger. That there are threats. Your father is right. And he's wrong." Rosakina sighed and returned to her seat, gesturing for Vegeta to join her. "Yes, you must become strong. Yes, the universe is dangerous, but strength without wisdom is just destruction waiting to happen. I've seen too many warriors burn bright and fast, leaving nothing but ashes. I'm not going to burn out," Vegeta insisted. "I'm different. You are. That's what worries me." She reached out and gently touched his cheek. "You have your father's talent, his drive, his unshakable will. But you also have something he sometimes lacks. The capacity for more than just fighting. I see it in you, Vegeta. Curiosity. Intelligence. The potential for wisdom. Wisdom won't stop Frieza if he decides to attack us," Vegeta pointed out. His mother's expression flickered, surprise quickly masked. "Your father told you about that?" "He told me we need to become stronger. Strong enough that no one can threaten us." Vegeta's small hands clenched into fists. "And I will be. I'll reach Tier 5 if it exists. I'll surpass everyone." Rosakina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried an undercurrent of sadness. "Be careful what you wish for, my son. Power is seductive. The more you have, the more you want. And sometimes, in the pursuit of strength, we lose sight of why we wanted it in the first place." Vegeta didn't understand what she meant. Not really. How could pursuing strength be wrong? They were Saiyans. Strength was their birthright, their purpose, their very identity. But he saw the concern in her eyes and forced himself to nod. "I'll be careful, mother. I promise." She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's all I ask? Now tell me about this new technique Master Paragus mentioned in his report. Something about concentrated flame projection?" Vegeta's expression brightened, and he launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the Crimson Lance concept he'd been developing. A way to focus his ki into devastating point strikes rather than diffuse energy blasts. As he talked, using his hands to illustrate the theory, Rosakina listened with apparent fascination, asking questions that showed she understood the technical aspects better than most warriors. It was a good moment, peaceful, and Vegeta would remember it in the years to come with aching clarity, because it was one of the last peaceful moments he would ever have. That night, Vegeta stood on the balcony of his chambers, looking out over the sprawling cityscape of the capital. The twin moons had risen, bathing everything in silver light that competed with the glow of a million lamps and screens. Somewhere out there, Saiyan children slept safely in their beds. Warriors patrolled the streets, vigilant against threats both foreign and domestic. Engineers worked night shifts in factories, producing the weapons and armor that made the Saiyan military unstoppable. All of it depended on strength. on the power of the royal family to protect them, to lead them, to ensure their prosperity. Vegeta closed his eyes and reached for his key. It came easily now, a warm presence at his core that responded to his will like a loyal hound. Red light flickered around his hands, beautiful and terrible. This was his birthright, the power that sets Saiyans apart from every other species in the cosmos. But was it enough? Somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, Lord Frieza sat in his flagship, making calculations and plans. The king's words had made one thing crystal clear: their independence, perhaps their very survival, would ultimately come down to strength. Not diplomacy, not trade agreements, not clever politics. Just raw, overwhelming power. Vegeta let the crimson key fade and opened his eyes. The city spread before him, fragile and precious despite its apparent strength. So many lives, all depending on warriors like him and his father to keep them safe. I will protect them, he whispered to the night. I will become stronger than anyone has ever been. I swear it. The wind carried his words away into the darkness. The moons continued their eternal dance across the sky. And on planet Vegeta, a 5-year-old prince made a promise that would shape the rest of his life. He didn't know that within weeks, everything would change. He didn't know that Lord Frieza was already making his move, that a fleet was being assembled, that the Saiyan race had mere days left before their world ended in fire and ice. He was just a child, talented beyond measure but still innocent in the ways that mattered, standing on a balcony and dreaming of becoming strong enough to protect his people. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Vegeta was in the middle of his academic lessons, because a prince needed more than just combat prowess, no matter how much he might prefer the training grounds to the classroom, when alarms began to sound throughout the palace. Not emergency klaxons, but the specific chime pattern that indicated the arrival of important guests. His tutor, an elderly Saiyan scholar named Bracco, looked up from the star charts they'd been studying with a frown. That's odd. The king wasn't expecting any delegations today, but Vegeta was already moving toward the window. From their position in the eastern tower, they had a clear view of the palace's main landing platform. A ship was settling onto the pad with the kind of precise control that spoke of either very good pilots or very advanced automation. It was unlike any Saiyan vessel Vegeta had seen, sleek and white, with curved lines that seemed designed more for aesthetics than function. That's Frieza Force design, Bracco said quietly, joining him at the window. They've come. Something in the scholar's tone sent ice down Vegeta's spine. Is that bad? That depends entirely on why they're here, Your Highness. They soon found out. King Vegeta had called an immediate assembly in the throne room. When Vegeta arrived, after being summoned by a very nervous guard, he found the vast space filled with the kingdom's highest-ranking warriors and officials. His father sat upon the crimson throne, posture rigid, face an impassive mask. But Vegeta could see the tension in his shoulders, the faint crimson glow around his clenched fists. Standing before the throne were 3 figures that made every instinct Vegeta possessed scream danger. The first was tall and purple, with a body that looked carved from living stone. The second was shorter, also purple but with spiky protrusions covering his head and shoulders. Both radiated power in a way that made even seasoned Saiyan warriors uncomfortable. But it was the third figure that commanded attention. He was smaller than his companions, perhaps the height of an average Saiyan male. But there was something about him that made size irrelevant. His skin was pale lavender white, his eyes blood red, and he wore ornate armor that probably cost more than most planets' annual GDP. Beneath his feet, the stone floor itself seemed to frost over, tiny ice crystals spreading outward in intricate patterns. This, Vegeta knew with absolute certainty, was Lord Frieza. King Vegeta. Frieza's voice was deceptively pleasant, carrying just a hint of something cold and amused. How delightful to finally visit your magnificent planet in person. The reports truly don't do it justice, Lord Frieza. The king's voice was carefully neutral. Your arrival is unexpected. We had no advance notice. Oh, you know how it is. Business, always so much business. I found myself with a free moment and thought, why not visit my dear friends, the Saiyans? Frieza's smile widened slightly. I hope I'm not intruding. It was masterfully done. Phrased as a friendly visit, but everyone in the room understood the subtext. This was a power play, a reminder that Frieza could arrive whenever he pleased, announced or not, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Of course not, King Vegeta said smoothly. Any friend of the Saiyan race is welcome here. May I offer you refreshment? Perhaps a tour of our facilities? How gracious. But first, I must confess I have an ulterior motive for my visit. Frieza's red eyes swept across the assembled Saiyans, and several warriors instinctively tensed. I've heard the most fascinating rumors. They say you've been developing new techniques, refining your Crimson Ki to unprecedented levels. And most intriguing of all, they say your young prince is quite the prodigy. Every eye in the room turned to Vegeta. He stood near the back, trying to be inconspicuous, but there was no hiding now. Slowly, he made his way forward, aware of the weight of hundreds of gazes on his small frame. Father, he said, stopping beside the throne and giving Frieza a formal nod, respectful but not subservient. So this is the famous Prince Vegeta. Frieza looked him over with an expression that might have been curiosity, or might have been calculating threat assessment. My, you are quite small, aren't you? It was deliberate, the subtle insult wrapped in seeming observation. Vegeta felt his Crimson Ki flare in response to the surge of indignation, but he forced it down, showing his power now would be playing right into whatever game Frieza was playing. I'm 5 years old, Vegeta said evenly. I'll grow. Oh, I'm sure you will. Frieza's smile never wavered. In fact, I'm counting on it. You see, King Vegeta, I have a proposition for you. A business opportunity, if you will. I'm listening, the king said, though his tone suggested he'd rather be doing anything else. Your people are magnificent warriors. The best in the universe, some say. But you're limited. By your planet, by your resources, by your relatively small population. Meanwhile, I have an empire that spans thousands of systems, more resources than I could spend in 100 lifetimes, and a constant need for skilled soldiers. Frieza spread his hands in a gesture of openness. What if we formalized our arrangement? What if the Saiyans became official members of my organization? You would have access to the finest training facilities, the best missions, compensation beyond your wildest dreams, and in return, you would lend your considerable strength to protecting my various business interests. The throne room had gone deathly quiet. What Frieza was proposing was nothing less than the complete subjugation of the Saiyan race, dressed up in the language of partnership and mutual benefit. We Saiyans value our independence, King Vegeta said carefully. It's not something we've ever been willing to compromise. Independence is such an abstract concept though, isn't it? Frieza's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath now. Tell me, King Vegeta, are you truly independent when you rely on me for weapons technology? When half the worlds you conquer are sold through my network? When your economy depends on trade relationships that I facilitate? We could find other partners. Could you? Frieza tilted his head. I wonder. You see, I have friends throughout the galaxy. Very loyal friends. Friends who would be quite upset if someone tried to compete with my business interests. Friends who might decide that weapons and technology should perhaps not be sold to certain aggressive warrior races. The threat hung in the air like a sword suspended by a thread. King Vegeta's aura flared, crimson light flooding the throne room, and several warriors reached for their weapons. The two beings flanking Frieza tensed, ready for combat. But Frieza just laughed. It was a light, almost musical sound that somehow made it more terrifying. Please, there's no need for hostility. I'm simply pointing out economic realities. I came here in friendship, to offer you an opportunity to elevate your people to heights you never dreamed possible. He turned his gaze back to Vegeta. Your son, for instance. With proper training, proper resources, who knows what he might become? I have training facilities that make your palace grounds look like a child's sandbox. Masters who have forgotten more about combat than most people ever learn. Under my patronage, young Vegeta here could become the most powerful warrior in the universe. Vegeta felt something stir inside him at those words. The most powerful warrior in the universe. Wasn't that exactly what he wanted? Wasn't that what his father had told him he needed to become? But he looked at his father's face, saw the carefully controlled fury there, and understood. This wasn't about becoming stronger. This was about control. about reducing the proud Saiyan race to nothing more than soldiers in Frisia's army. I appreciate the offer, King Vegeta said, and his voice could have frozen stars. But the Saiyans will chart their own course, as they always have. We are warriors, Lord Frisia. Not servants. The temperature in the throne room dropped precipitously. The frost that had been spreading from beneath Frisia's feet accelerated, covering 10 feet of floor in seconds. His smile never wavered, but his eyes went flat and cold. How unfortunate, Frisia said softly. I had hoped we could come to an arrangement. But I suppose some people need time to consider their options. I'll give you 1 week, King Vegeta. 1 week to think about the prosperity I'm offering versus the difficulties that might arise if you refuse. I trust you'll make the wise choice. He turned to leave, his 2 companions falling in behind him. But he paused at the threshold and looked back, his gaze settling on Vegeta one last time. Such potential, he mused. It would be a shame if it went to waste. Then they were gone, leaving behind only the fading frost and a throne room full of grim-faced warriors who all understood what had just happened. War was coming. The week that followed was the longest of Vegeta's young life. The palace transformed from a center of Saiyan power into something like a fortress under siege. Warriors who had been stationed on conquered worlds were recalled. Defensive systems were brought online. Emergency supply stockpiles were inventoried and expanded, and his father trained. King Vegeta spent every waking moment in the deep training chambers beneath the palace, pushing his Tier 4 power to its absolute limits. The vibrations from his exertions could be felt throughout the entire structure. Sometimes, at night, Vegeta would press his hand against the wall of his bedroom and feel the rhythm of his father's ki, a steady, pulsing heartbeat of crimson power. Vegeta himself wasn't idle. Master Paragus had intensified his training regimen, though with strict limits on how far he was allowed to push his Tier 2 manifestation. Every day, Vegeta grew more comfortable with the Scarlet Blaze, learning to maintain it for longer periods, to fight effectively while wreathed in crimson flames. But it wasn't enough. He could feel it in his bones. When Frisia returned, when the confrontation came, Tier 2 wouldn't be sufficient. He needed more. On the 6th day, Vegeta approached his father in the training chambers. The king stood in the center of a scorched arena that bore the scars of his intense sessions. The floor was cracked and melted in places, the walls blackened with soot, the very air shimmering with residual heat. Father, Vegeta called out. I want to train with you. King Vegeta turned, sweat pouring down his face, his aura still crackling around him like a living thing. For a moment, Vegeta thought he would refuse, but then the king's expression softened slightly, and he nodded. Very well. Show me your Scarlet Blaze. Vegeta closed his eyes and reached for his ki. It came instantly now, a faithful servant to his will. Heat bloomed in his chest and spread through his limbs. When he opened his eyes, crimson flames danced across his skin, bright and eager. His father studied him critically. Good. Your control has improved. But control alone won't save you in a real battle. You need to understand that crimson ki isn't just energy. It's the physical manifestation of your will, your emotions, your very soul. Every time you draw on it, you're putting a piece of yourself into the universe. He gestured, and his own aura flared. Not the scarlet blaze of Tier 2, but the deeper, more intense ruby tempest of Tier 4. The flames around him were so hot that the air itself distorted, and Vegeta had to take an involuntary step back from the sheer pressure. This is what you're reaching for, King Vegeta said. Not just more power, but a fundamental transformation of what you are. At Tier 4, your ki becomes almost alive. It responds to thoughts as much as emotions. It can shield you, strike for you, even think for you in the heat of battle. How do I reach it? Vegeta asked, awestruck despite himself. By breaking every limit you think you have. By pushing past pain, past exhaustion, past fear. The king's expression grew distant. I achieved Tier 4 in battle, facing an enemy that should have killed me. I was 25 years old, and I'd spent a decade at Tier 3, convinced I'd reached my ceiling. Then I was forced beyond it, and I either transformed or died. You think Frisia will force me to transform? Vegeta asked. His father's aura dimmed slightly. I hope Frisia never gets the chance to touch you. But yes, if it comes to war, and I think it will, you may find yourself in situations that demand more than you think you can give. That's when true power emerges. They trained for hours after that. Not sparring, Vegeta wasn't nearly strong enough for that yet, but drilling. His father would call out commands, and Vegeta would execute them. Burst of speed, shield manifestation, strike, counter, dodge. Over and over until his body moved on instinct, until the Crimson Ki felt like an extension of his own flesh. When they finally stopped, Vegeta was shaking with exhaustion, his scarlet blaze flickering like a candle in high wind. But he felt change somehow, like he'd taken a step closer to something greater. You did well today, his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Better than I dared hope. If the worst happens, it won't, Vegeta interrupted fiercely. You're the strongest Saiyan alive. Frieza can't beat you. King Vegeta smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Strength isn't everything, my son. Frieza didn't build his empire through personal power alone. He's cunning, ruthless, and has resources we can't match. If he decides to destroy us, he won't challenge me to honorable combat. He'll bring overwhelming force and simply erase us. Then we'll fight with everything we have, Vegeta said. Every Saiyan, every warrior. We'll make him regret ever threatening us. Yes, his father agreed quietly. We will. Come, your mother will be wondering where we are. Let's have dinner as a family. It's been too long since we did that. They walked back through the palace together, father and son, king and prince. Around them, warriors prepared for a battle that might determine the fate of their entire race. Above them, the twin suns set on what might be the last peaceful night planet Vegeta would ever know. Tomorrow, Lord Frieza's week would be up. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, the royal family sat together in Queen Rosakina's chambers, sharing a meal and pretending, just for a few hours, that the universe wasn't pressing in around them with hostile intent. Vegeta ate mechanically, watching his parents exchange glances full of things they wouldn't say in front of him, and wondered what the next day would bring. He fell asleep that night with his hand curled into a fist, crimson light flickering faintly around his fingers even in slumber, dreaming of power and promises he intended to keep. The last good dream Prince Vegeta would have for a very long time. The screaming started at dawn. Vegeta jolted awake, his small body responding to danger before his mind fully processed what was happening. The palace shook, not the familiar tremors from training sessions, but something violent and catastrophic. Dust rained from the ceiling. Through his window, the sky had turned an unnatural shade of purple-black, streaked with lines of white energy that looked like cracks in reality itself. He was out of bed and in his armor within seconds, fingers fumbling with clasps that suddenly seemed too complicated. Another explosion rocked the palace, closer this time, and he heard something that made his blood freeze. His mother, screaming his name. Vegeta burst from his chambers and into chaos. The corridor was filled with smoke and frightened servants. Guards ran past, shouting orders he couldn't quite make out over the cacophony. The emergency klaxons wailed their monotonous warning, somehow both deafening and useless. Mother! He called out, pushing through the crowd. His small size was actually an advantage here. He could slip between bodies that blocked the hallway. Mother, where are you? A hand grabbed his shoulder, and he spun, crimson ki already flickering to life around his fist, ready to strike. But it was only Master Paragus, his weathered face streaked with ash and blood. Your Highness, thank the stars. Your mother sent me to find you. Come, quickly, there isn't much time. What's happening? Is it Frieza? Where's my father? Paragus didn't answer, just pulled him along with surprising strength. They navigated through corridors Vegeta had walked his entire life. But everything looked wrong now. Scorch marks blackened the walls. Bodies lay in pools of their own blood, servants, guards, people whose names he'd known. The sweet, cloying smell of burned flesh mixed with the acrid stench of melted metal. They burst into Queen Rosakina's chambers to find organized chaos. His mother stood at the center of the room, barking orders to a handful of elite guards while simultaneously packing a small bag with supplies. She looked up as they entered, and the relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. Vegeta. She was beside him in an instant, hands checking him for injuries with practiced efficiency. Thank the stars you're safe. Are you hurt? Did you see anything? I'm fine, but mother, what's... Frisia is attacking. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the terror underneath. He brought his entire fleet. Hundreds of ships. They're bombarding the planet from orbit, and he has ground forces deployed throughout the capital. Your father is holding the throne room, buying us time to. Another explosion, close enough that they all staggered. Part of the ceiling collapsed, and one of the guards moved with inhuman speed to shield them with his body. Debris clattered against his armor. We need to leave now, Your Majesty, the guard said urgently. The escape ships are fueled and ready. Escape ships? Vegeta felt like he'd been punched in the gut. We're running? What about father? What about our people? His mother knelt before him, gripping his shoulders. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice remained firm. Your father is doing what he must to protect as many as possible, and we are doing what we must to ensure the survival of the royal line. You are the future of the Saiyan race, Vegeta. If you die here, our people truly have no hope. But I can fight. I've reached tier 2, I can. You are 5 years old. His mother's grip tightened. 5 years old, and as brave as any warrior I've ever known. But bravery alone won't save you from what's coming. Frisia has brought an army specifically designed to kill Saiyans. He has weapons that can sterilize entire continents. If he decides to destroy planet Vegeta completely, she trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. Through the shattered window, Vegeta could see the sky was now alive with streaking lights. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Frisia's ships, raining death on the world below. In the distance, massive explosions sent mushroom clouds rising into the atmosphere. The capital was burning, Your Majesty, Master Paragus said quietly. We must go. The king's last order was explicit: get the prince to safety, no matter the cost. Rosakina nodded and pulled Vegeta into a fierce embrace. He felt her shaking, felt the wetness of her tears against his neck. When she pulled back, she pressed something into his hand, a small metallic crest, the royal seal of House Vegeta, glowing faintly with residual crimson key. This was your father's, she whispered. He wanted you to have it. To remember who you are, where you come from. To remember that you are Prince Vegeta, heir to the throne, and that one day, you will avenge what was done here. Come with me, Vegeta pleaded, clutching the crest. Please, mother, you can. I need to help evacuate the civilians. There are still thousands in the lower city who need protection. She stood, her decision clearly already made. I am their queen. I will not abandon them. But, no buts. Listen to me, Vegeta. Listen carefully. She cupped his face in her hands. You are going to survive this. You are going to grow strong, stronger than your father, stronger than Frisia, stronger than anyone. And when you are ready, you will come back. You will rebuild our people. You will make the universe remember that Saiyans bow to no one. Do you understand me? Vegeta's vision blurred with tears he refused to let fall. He was 5 years old, and his world was ending, and all he could do was nod and try to be brave. I understand, mother. Good boy. She kissed his forehead. Now go. Master Paragus will take care of you. Trust him with your life, because I'm trusting him with something far more precious. My son. Paragus bowed deeply. I will guard him with my life, my queen. You have my oath. Another explosion, this one powerful enough to crack the walls. The building groaned ominously. Go! Rosakina commanded, and her voice carried all the authority of a queen giving her final order. Go now! Paragus grabbed Vegeta and ran. The last image Vegeta had of his mother was her standing tall amid the chaos, beautiful and terrible, her own scarlet blaze igniting as she prepared to face whatever came through those doors. Then they were racing through collapsing corridors, the palace literally falling apart around them. Bodies littered their path, some Saiyan, some alien species Vegeta didn't recognize. Frisia's ground troops. The invaders had made it this deep already. They burst into a hangar bay to find 3 small ships waiting, engines already humming. Other survivors were loading into 2 of them, warriors, a few civilians, people with blood and ash coating their faces. Nappa was there, the massive general barking orders and physically lifting injured Saiyans into the vessels. Raditz, younger and less composed, was helping load supplies with shaking hands. About time. Nappa roared when he saw them. The king's holding them off, but they're breaking through his defenses. We have maybe 2 minutes before this whole section is overrun. Then we leave in 1 minute, Paragus said, guiding Vegeta toward the nearest ship. Everyone who can fit, get aboard now. Vegeta stumbled up the ramp, his eyes drawn to the hangar's entrance. Through the massive open doors, he could see the capital city burning. The sky was a hellscape of fire and streaking energy beams, and somewhere in the palace behind them, his father was fighting. He could feel it, a massive surge of crimson ki that made every other power signature seem insignificant by comparison. King Vegeta had released his full Tier 4 power, the ruby tempest blazing like a second sun. The palace shook with the force of his battle. "Father," Vegeta whispered. Then he felt something else. Something cold and terrible, like ice water being poured directly into his soul. A power that wasn't Crimson Ki but something fundamentally different. Frost and death and absolute zero given form. Frieza had entered the battle personally. The two powers clashed, and the resulting shockwave shattered every window in the hangar. Vegeta was thrown backward, caught by Nappa's massive hand before he could hit the deck. The ship's engine screamed as the pilot fought to maintain stability. "We're leaving now," Nappa bellowed, practically throwing Vegeta into a seat. "Strap in, boy." The ship lurched upward. Through the viewport, Vegeta watched his home fall away. The palace was a ruin, entire sections collapsed or burning. The city beyond was worse, a patchwork of fires and craters, with hundreds of small figures fleeing through the streets while Frieza's troops pursued them. And above it all, two figures danced in the sky, moving so fast they were barely visible. One trailed crimson flames that lit up the darkness. The other left frost patterns in the air, beautiful and deadly. King Vegeta versus Lord Frieza, the greatest Saiyan warrior versus the self-proclaimed strongest being in the universe. For a moment, just one glorious moment, it looked like the king might win. His ruby tempest blazed with such intensity that it drove back the darkness. His strikes came faster than thought, each one carrying enough force to shatter mountains. He was magnificent, terrible, everything a Saiyan king should be. Then Frieza stopped playing. Even from this distance, even through the ship's shields and viewport, Vegeta felt it when Frieza's power increased. The tyrant's aura, previously white and crystalline, deepened to blue, so blue it was almost black, like the deepest parts of an Arctic ocean. The temperature dropped so precipitously that frost formed on the inside of the ship's windows. "No," Vegeta breathed. "No, no, no." King Vegeta's crimson ki flared one last time, a defiant burst of power that lit up the entire hemisphere. Then Frieza moved, just a single strike, almost casual, and the king fell from the sky like a broken doll. Vegeta screamed. He didn't remember deciding to scream, but suddenly he was doing it, his throat raw. His small hands pressed against the viewport as if he could somehow reach through it and change what he was seeing. His crimson ki erupted uncontrolled, scarlet blaze filling the passenger compartment. "Get it under control," Nappa shouted, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. The ship accelerated, G-forces pressing Vegeta back into his seat. Planet Vegeta shrank below them, but he couldn't look away. Couldn't stop watching as Frieza descended toward the fallen king. Couldn't stop himself from witnessing the moment when his father, the strongest warrior he'd ever known, the man who was supposed to be invincible, was executed with a casual wave of Frieza's hand. The ruby tempest guttered and died. King Vegeta, ruler of all Saiyans, was gone, and Frieza wasn't done. The tyrant rose higher, so high he was visible even from their rapidly increasing altitude. He spread his arms wide, and his power surged again, not to Tier 2 or 3 or 4 of the Crimson Ki system, but to something else entirely. Something that operated on completely different principles. His frost core reached a level Vegeta didn't have words for. The blue-black aura expanded, grew, became a sphere of absolute cold that encompassed the entire planet. "He's going to destroy it," Paragus said quietly, horror evident in his voice. "Stars above, he's going to destroy the entire planet. All ships, maximum acceleration." Nappa's voice came over the comm system. "Emergency jump coordinates entered. We jump in 30 seconds whether you're ready or not." Vegeta couldn't tear his eyes away. couldn't stop watching as Frieza channeled inconceivable amounts of energy into a single point. The planet's crust cracked like an egg. Lava geysers erupted across the surface. The oceans began to boil. Somewhere down there, his mother was dying. Thousands of Saiyans, warriors, civilians, children, all dying because one tyrant had decided they were a threat to his empire. 10 seconds to jump. Planet Vegeta glowed from within, like a coal in a forge. The cracks in its crust widened, spewing light and heat. It was simultaneously the most beautiful and most terrible thing Vegeta had ever seen. 5 seconds. Frieza made a pushing motion with his hands, and the planet's core destabilized. Vegeta felt it through the force, through the crimson key that connected all Saiyans to their homeworld. A tearing sensation, like something essential being ripped from his very soul. Jump! The ship lurched into hyperspace just as planet Vegeta exploded. The last thing Vegeta saw through the viewport was an expanding sphere of light and debris, the funeral pyre of his entire civilization. Then there was only the swirling blue-white of hyperspace, and he was left staring at his own reflection in the darkened glass. A small boy with tears streaming down his face, clutching a metal crest in white-knuckled hands. The Saiyan race had been exterminated. His parents were dead. His homeworld was destroyed, and Prince Vegeta, 5 years old and utterly alone, began to understand what hatred truly meant. The refugees' ships traveled for 3 days before they dared drop out of hyperspace. They emerged in an empty sector, surrounded by nothing but distant stars and the cold void of space. It was as far from Frieza's territory as they could get without leaving the known galaxy entirely. Vegeta spent those 3 days in near catatonic silence. He sat in his assigned seat, staring at nothing, his small hands alternating between clutching his father's crest and clenching into fists that trembled with suppressed rage. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, barely responded when people spoke to him. His mind kept replaying the same scenes over and over. His father falling, his mother's final order, the planet exploding. An endless loop of trauma that his 5-year-old brain couldn't process. On the second day, Paragus tried to get him to drink some water. "Your Highness, you must maintain your strength. Your parents would want." "Don't." The word came out flat, emotionless. "Don't tell me what they would want. They're dead. They're all dead." Paragus had no response to that. On the third day, when they finally stopped running, Nappa called a meeting of all the survivors. There were 43 of them total across the 3 ships. 43 Saiyans out of a population that had numbered in the millions. They gathered in the cargo hold of the largest ship, a space barely big enough to hold them all. Vegeta stood near the back, his expression blank, while Nappa addressed the group. "I know you're all in shock," the general said, his usually booming voice subdued. "I know you've lost everything, family, friends, our entire civilization. But we're alive, and as long as we're alive, the Saiyan race survives." "What race?" someone called out bitterly. "We're 43 people." "That's not a race, that's a rounding error." "It's what we have," Nappa countered. "And we owe it to everyone who died to make sure we survive, to rebuild too." "Rebuild with what?" Raditz demanded. He looked terrible, his long hair disheveled, his eyes hollow. "We have 3 ships, enough supplies for maybe 2 months, and nowhere to go. Frieza controls half the galaxy. The other half is controlled by people who won't risk harboring refugees from someone Frieza specifically wanted dead." "Then we find work," Nappa said firmly. "We're warriors. The best in the universe. There's always someone who needs skilled fighters. We hire ourselves out, we earn resources, we stay alive until we're strong enough to." "To what?" Vegeta's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. Everyone turned to look at him, this small child who had barely spoken in 3 days. "To fight Frieza? With 43 warriors? You saw what he did to Father. You saw what he did to our entire planet. How exactly do you propose we defeat that?" Nappa's expression softened. "Your Highness, I know you're grieving, but I'm not grieving." Vegeta's voice was cold, controlled, and somehow more disturbing than if he'd been screaming. "I'm calculating. Frieza's power operates on entirely different principles than our Crimson Key. He has armies, fleets, resources we can't match. Fighting him directly would be suicide. So what do you suggest?" Paragus asked carefully. That we simply accept what happened? That we forget about revenge? I suggest we survive. Vegeta walked forward through the crowd, which parted before him without conscious thought. He was just a child, barely visible among the adult warriors, but he carried himself with an authority that demanded attention. We survive, and we grow stronger. We learn everything we can about Frisia's power system, about his empire, about his weaknesses. And when we're ready, when we're actually ready, not just angry and desperate, then we strike. The prince speaks wisdom, an older warrior said grudgingly. But how do we survive? None of us have ever worked as common mercenaries before. Then we learn. Vegeta's eyes scanned the assembled Saiyans. We swallow our pride and we do whatever it takes to stay alive. Because if we die now, if these 43 people scatter and disappear, then Frisia wins. He doesn't just kill us, he erases us. The Saiyan race becomes nothing more than a footnote in some historical database. He pulled out his father's crest, holding it up so everyone could see it. The metal caught the harsh overhead lights, gleaming crimson. This is the royal seal. My father's last gift to me. And I swear on it, on his memory and my mother's sacrifice, that I will not let our people be forgotten. We will survive. We will grow strong. And one day, we will make Frisia pay for what he did. Silence filled the cargo hold. Then, slowly, warriors began to straighten. Began to look less like defeated refugees and more like Saiyans. All hail Prince Vegeta, someone said quietly. Then another voice joined in, and another, until all 43 survivors were saying it in unison. All hail Prince Vegeta, heir to the throne, rightful king of the Saiyan race. Vegeta accepted their acclaim with a slight nod, his face still expressionless. Inside, something had hardened, crystallized. The frightened child who had watched his world die was being buried beneath layers of purpose and cold determination. He would survive. He would become stronger. And one day, he would kill Frisia. Everything else was secondary. The next 5 years were a lesson in humiliation and survival. The Saiyan refugees split into smaller groups. It was safer that way, harder for Frisia to track them all down. Vegeta ended up with Nappa and Raditz, along with a handful of other warriors. They took whatever work they could find, usually as hired muscle for petty warlords and crime syndicates who cared more about results than the species of their employees. It was degrading work for warriors who had once commanded respect throughout the galaxy. They fought in gladiatorial arenas for the entertainment of fat merchants. They provided security for smugglers moving contraband through Frisia's territory. They even, on one particularly low occasion, worked as bodyguards for a crime lord's spoiled daughter. But it kept them alive, and it kept them moving, always staying one step ahead of Frisia's informant network. Vegeta, now 10 years old, sat in the cargo hold of their latest ship, a decrepit freighter they'd purchased with 3 months' worth of earnings, and reviewed intelligence reports on his data pad. He'd grown taller, though he was still small by Saiyan standards. His face had lost some of its childhood roundness, his features sharpening into something that would eventually resemble his father's stern countenance. Around him, the other Saiyans were training, maintaining their combat readiness during the long flight to their next job. The familiar sounds, grunts of exertion, the crackling of crimson ki, bodies hitting the reinforced walls, had become almost meditative to him. Still reading about Frisia? Raditz asked, dropping down beside him. The younger warrior had grown his hair even longer, using it to hide the nervous energy that never quite left his eyes. Know your enemy, Vegeta said without looking up. That's what father always taught. Your father also taught that Saiyans face their enemies head-on, not skulking in the shadows like cowards. Vegeta's eyes snapped to Raditz, and the younger warrior actually flinched. There was something in the prince's gaze that hadn't been there before the planet's destruction, something cold and calculating that made even seasoned warriors uncomfortable. My father faced his enemy head-on, Vegeta said quietly. He's dead. I'd prefer a different approach. Raditz had no response to that. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then retreated to join the training group, leaving Vegeta alone with his research. The data pad displayed everything they'd managed to learn about Frisia's power system over the past 5 years. It wasn't much. The tyrant guarded his secrets well, but certain patterns had emerged. Frisia's power, which Vegeta had dubbed the Frost Core, operated on principles completely different from Crimson Key. Where Saiyan power was fueled by emotion and channeled through willpower, Frisia's abilities seemed to be biological, an inherent part of his species' physiology. He didn't transform through emotional triggers. He had multiple forms that he shifted between at will, each one exponentially more powerful than the last. The form that had destroyed planet Vegeta hadn't even been Frisia's final one. Intelligence suggested he had at least one more transformation beyond that, though no one who'd witnessed it had survived to provide details. It's not fair, Vegeta muttered, scrolling through power estimates. He doesn't have to train, doesn't have to work for it. He was just born with that much power. Complaining won't change reality, Your Highness. Vegeta looked up to find Master Paragus approaching. The old instructor had aged considerably in the past 5 years, the stress of exile carving new lines into his weathered face. But his eyes remained sharp. I'm not complaining, Vegeta said. I'm analyzing. There has to be a way to bridge the gap. If Frisia's power is biological, inherent to his species, then perhaps you need to stop thinking about defeating Frisia and focus on surviving another year. Paragus sat down heavily beside him. You're 10 years old, Vegeta. You've already achieved Tier 2, which most warriors never reach in their entire lives. That's extraordinary. But you're not ready to challenge a galactic tyrant. When will I be ready? Vegeta demanded. 15? 20? 30? How long do I wait while that monster sits on his throne, unpunished for genocide? As long as it takes. Paragus's voice was gentle but firm. Your father tried to fight before he was ready, and he died. Your mother chose to stay and help others, and she died. You are the last of the royal line, Vegeta. The only one left who can rebuild our people. If you throw your life away on a suicide mission, then the Saiyan race truly ends. Vegeta wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But he knew Paragus was right. 5 years of exile had taught him that righteous anger wasn't enough. He needed to be smarter, stronger, more patient than his enemies expected. I hate waiting, he said finally. I know. But patience is a weapon too. And right now, it might be the only weapon we have that Frisia doesn't know how to counter. The ship's comm system crackled to life. Nappa's voice boomed through the speakers, approaching the rendezvous point. Everyone gear up. This job's paying triple the usual rate, which means it's either extremely dangerous or extremely illegal. Probably both. Vegeta stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened during his long period of sitting. What's the job? Corporate espionage, Nappa replied over the comm. Some tech company wants us to infiltrate a competitor's facility and steal research data. Should be straightforward, in and out, minimal combat. Should be, Raditz muttered darkly. But it never is. They equip themselves with the professionalism of experienced mercenaries. Battle suits designed for stealth rather than show, suppressors for their key signatures, weapons they'd acquired over years of dirty work. Vegeta strapped a blade to his back, not a Saiyan weapon, but something he'd taken from a particularly dangerous opponent a year ago. He'd learned that Crimson Key, while powerful, was also conspicuous. Sometimes missions required subtlety. The ship docked at a massive space station, one of hundreds of such facilities scattered throughout neutral space where criminals, refugees, and other undesirables conducted business away from government oversight. Vegeta had been to dozens of these stations over the years. They all smelled the same: recycled air, stale food, and desperation. Their employer met them in a private docking bay, a nervous little alien with too many eyes and not enough spine. He provided them with floor plans, security codes, and a strict timeline. In and out in 2 hours, no witnesses, no evidence. This is beneath us, Raditz complained as they made their way through the station's maintenance corridors. Sneaking around like common thieves. This is survival, Vegeta corrected. And you'll do it without complaint because the alternative is starving in some gutter. They reached the competitor's facility without incident. The security was laughable compared to what they'd faced on actual military installations. Vegeta bypassed the electronic locks while Nappa and Raditz stood watch. The guards never knew they were there. Inside, they split up. Vegeta headed for the main server room while the others secured the perimeter. His small size was actually an advantage here. He could slip through ventilation shafts and crawl spaces that would have been impossible for adult warriors. The server room was cold, filled with the hum of computers processing terabytes of data. Vegeta plugged in the storage device their employer had provided and initiated the download. According to the display, it would take 8 minutes. 8 minutes alone with his thoughts. With memories. He stared at his reflection in the blank monitor screen and saw his father's face overlapping his own. King Vegeta had looked so confident that last day, so certain that he could protect his people. Had he known, at the end, that he was going to lose? Had he felt fear, or just rage that his strength wasn't enough? I will not make your mistake, father, Vegeta thought. I will not fight until I'm absolutely certain I can win. Warning, a calm computer voice announced. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols engaged. Vegeta cursed and moved faster, overriding lockouts that sprang up trying to stop the download. 5 minutes remaining. He could hear alarms beginning to sound in the distance. The facility's security forces mobilizing. Nappa, he spoke into his comm unit. We have a problem. I noticed, Nappa replied dryly. About 30 guards between us and the exit. Can you finish the download? 3 minutes, then we hold here. But hurry, Your Highness. I'm detecting power signatures that suggest they've hired some serious muscle. Vegeta's fingers flew across the keyboard, simultaneously managing the download and locking doors throughout the facility to slow the security response. This was the reality of his life now, not glorious battles fought in the open, but desperate scrambles in the shadows, always one step ahead of detection. The download completed. Vegeta pocketed the storage device and headed for the exit. But he'd only made it halfway down the corridor when he felt it. A familiar sensation that made his blood run cold. Crimson Key. Another Saiyan. He rounded a corner, and came face to face with a warrior he didn't recognize. The man was tall, scarred, with the hard eyes of someone who'd survived too many battles. He wore armor that bore Frieza Force insignia. Well, the warrior said, his voice carrying a nasty edge. Look what we have here. A little Saiyan doing petty crimes. How the mighty have fallen. Vegeta's hand moved to his blade. Get out of my way. I don't think so. You see, Frieza's offered quite the bounty for information about surviving Saiyans. And here you are, gift-wrapped. The warrior's aura flared. Tier 2, Scarlet Blaze, controlled and powerful. Nothing personal, kid. Just business. Business. Vegeta's voice dropped to something dangerous. You betray your own species for money, and you call it business? My species is extinct, in case you hadn't noticed. I'm just trying to survive, same as you. Difference is, I picked the winning side. The warrior lunged. Fast, faster than most opponents Vegeta had faced in the past 5 years. But he'd been training too, learning to fight not just with raw power but with technique and cunning. He slipped under the strike and drove his blade toward the warrior's midsection. The warrior blocked with an armored forearm, Crimson Key reinforcing the metal. They traded strikes in the narrow corridor, either giving ground. The warrior had more power. Vegeta could feel the age gap in their key signatures. But Vegeta was smaller, faster, and absolutely unwilling to lose. You fight well for a child, the warrior grunted, landing a kick that sent Vegeta sliding backward. But you're out of your league. Surrender, and I'll make sure Frieza kills you quickly. I have a better idea. Vegeta's scarlet blaze ignited, crimson flames wreathing his body. You die here, and I add your name to the list of traitors who will answer for their betrayal. He pushed his power higher than he had in months, letting the rage and grief he usually kept locked down fuel his ki. The corridor's temperature spiked. The walls began to char. The warrior's confidence wavered. That's impossible. You're just a child. You shouldn't be able to maintain Tier 2 like that. I'm not just a child. Vegeta's voice was cold, emotionless, terrifying coming from someone so young. I'm Prince Vegeta. Son of King Vegeta. Heir to a throne that no longer exists. And I will not be stopped by a traitor who sold his soul for scraps from our people's murderer. He attacked with everything he had. The technique was crude compared to what he'd eventually develop, but the sheer fury behind it was overwhelming. The warrior tried to block, tried to counter, but Vegeta was beyond caring about his own safety. Every strike carried the weight of 5 years of suppressed rage. The warrior's defense cracked. Vegeta's blade found a gap in his armor, driving deep. The man staggered backward, disbelief written across his features. Impossible, he whispered as his crimson ki guttered and died. You're just a prince, Vegeta finished coldly. Remember that when you meet my father in whatever afterlife awaits traitors. The warrior collapsed. Vegeta stood over him, breathing hard, his scarlet blaze slowly fading. He felt no satisfaction in the kill, no triumph, just the grim knowledge that this was what his life had become, killing other Saiyans in back alleys while their homeworld's ashes drifted through space. Your Highness! Nappa's voice crackled over the calm. What's your status? Delayed. But I'm on my way. Vegeta stepped over the body without looking back. Be ready to launch. We're about to have company. The escape was messy but successful. They made it back to their ship with security forces in pursuit, launching just as heavier weapons came online. As they jumped to hyperspace, Vegeta stood in the cockpit and watched the space station shrink into the distance. Another job completed. Another step toward survival. Another day further from the warrior he'd been born to become. 3 years later, Vegeta turned 13, and everything changed again. They were between jobs, refueling at a way station on the Outer Rim, when the message came through. Not on their personal channels, but on the general mercenary network that connected independent warriors across the galaxy. All available fighters, we have a Priority 1 situation on Namek. Multiple reports of Frisia force activity. Top dollar for anyone willing to take the contract. Vegeta, who had been reviewing star charts, looked up sharply. Namek? That's in Frisia's territory. Why would someone be offering contracts against him there? Nappa pulled up the full message. His expression grew grim as he read. It's not a contract against Frisia. It's stars above. Someone leaked information about Namek's Dragon Balls. Dragon Balls? Raditz looked confused. What are those? But Vegeta's mind was already racing. He'd heard legends, stories his mother had told him when he was very young, about magical artifacts that could grant any wish. He'd assumed they were just fairy tales, like the stories of Tier 5 Obsidian Flame. If they're real, he said slowly, and if Frisia is going there, then he's going to wish for immortality, Nappa finished. Making the one being we need to kill completely unkillable. Silence fell over the cockpit. They'd spent 8 years hiding, surviving, slowly building their strength. But if Frisia became immortal, all of that would be pointless. They could train for 100 years and it wouldn't matter. We have to go, Vegeta said. Your Highness, that's suicide. Frisia will have his entire elite guard there. Even if we could, we have to go, Vegeta repeated, his voice harder. Because if we don't, if he gets that wish, then everything, my parents' deaths, our people's extinction, 8 years of exile, all of it becomes meaningless. We either stop him now or we accept that we'll never stop him. Nappa and Raditz exchanged glances. They'd watched Vegeta grow from a traumatized child into something harder, colder, more focused. Sometimes they missed the boy he'd been, but they couldn't deny that he was right. All right, Nappa said finally. We go to Namek. But we go smart. We gather intelligence first, we find allies if possible, and we only strike when we see an opening. Agreed. Vegeta pulled up star charts for the Namek system. Plot a course. And send out feelers to the other Saiyan groups. If we're going to do this, we'll need every warrior we can get. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Vegeta returned to his quarters. He sat on his bunk, little more than a metal shelf with a thin mattress, and pulled out his father's crest. 8 years of handling had worn some of the shine off the metal, but the royal seal still glowed faintly with residual crimson ki. I don't know if this will work, father, he said to the empty room. I don't know if I'm strong enough. But I'm going to try. Because that's what you taught me. Saiyans never give up, never surrender, never bow to anyone. He closed his hand around the crest, feeling its familiar weight. Somewhere ahead, on a planet he'd never seen, his enemy waited. The being who had destroyed his world, killed his parents, scattered his people to the winds. And Prince Vegeta, 13 years old and burning with cold fury, was done running. Namek would be where it ended, one way or another. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying him toward his destiny and a confrontation 8 years in the making. In his quarters, Vegeta began his pre-battle meditation, reaching for his crimson key and pushing it higher, harder, faster. He'd reached Tier 2 at age 5. He'd maintained it through 8 years of exile, but Tier 2 wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough. If he was going to face Frieza, if he was going to have any chance at all, he needed to break through to Tier 3. The Crimson Inferno, a level of power that only the greatest Saiyan warriors had ever achieved. He had the journey to Namek to figure out how. Maybe a week, maybe less. It would have to be enough. It had to be, because the alternative, living the rest of his life knowing he could have stopped Frieza but wasn't strong enough, was unthinkable. The prince closed his eyes and began to train, pushing his small body to its limits, and beyond. The ship carried him through the darkness toward a green world he'd never seen, where the fate of the universe would be decided. And in the depths of space, alone in his quarters, Prince Vegeta began to understand what his father had tried to tell him that last day. Power wasn't just about strength. It was about sacrifice. About being willing to risk everything, lose everything, for a cause greater than yourself. He was ready to make that sacrifice. He just hoped he'd live long enough to make it matter. Namek hung in the viewscreen like a green jewel against the black velvet of space. 3 suns orbited the planet in a complex dance that bathed it in perpetual daylight, and from orbit, Vegeta could see the distinctive blue grass and emerald waters that marked it as fundamentally different from any world he'd visited before. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Everything planet Vegeta had never been, and Frieza was going to destroy it. Sensors are picking up at least 40 Frieza Force ships in orbit, Nappa reported from the pilot's seat, his massive frame hunched over the controls. They're running a standard blockade pattern. We'll have trouble getting through undetected. Then we don't try for undetected. Vegeta stood behind him, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. 13 years old, but his eyes held the weight of decades. We come in fast and low, use one of the polar approaches where their coverage is thinnest. By the time they react, we'll be on the ground. And then? Raditz asked nervously. His long hair was tied back for once, giving his sharp features an almost predatory cast. We're 3 Scions against Frieza's entire elite guard. The moment they realize we're here, they'll have bigger problems than us. Vegeta pulled up a tactical display showing the planet's surface. Intelligence suggests Frieza's already planetside, searching for the Dragon Balls. That means his forces are scattered, searching villages and settlements. We use that. We stay mobile, hit supply lines, create chaos. Make them think there's a larger resistance than 3 warriors. Classic guerrilla tactics, Nappa said approvingly. But that's buying time, not winning. Eventually, we'll have to face Frieza directly. Eventually, Vegeta agreed. But not until I'm ready. He didn't elaborate, but both warriors understood. For the past week of travel, Vegeta had pushed himself relentlessly, training in the ship's cargo hold until he collapsed from exhaustion, then dragging himself back to his feet and training more. He was chasing something, a breakthrough that had remained tantalizingly out of reach. Tier 3. The Crimson Inferno. He touched the edge of it twice during the journey, felt his scarlet blaze begin to deepen and intensify. But each time, something had held him back, some internal barrier he couldn't quite break through. His father had said that transformations came when you were pushed beyond your limits in actual combat. Namek would provide plenty of opportunities for that. Beginning atmospheric entry, Nappa announced. Everyone strap in. This is going to get rough. The ship shook as it hit Namek's upper atmosphere, friction heating the hull until it glowed cherry red. Warning alarms blared as enemy sensors locked onto them. Energy blasts streaked past the viewport. Some kind of automated defense system. They are firing. Raditz yelped, gripping his seat. So fire back, Vegeta said calmly. Nappa, evasive pattern Delta 7. Raditz, man the guns. What followed was 3 minutes of controlled chaos. Nappa's piloting skills, honed over decades of military service, turned their small freighter into a dancing target that frustrated the tracking systems. Raditz's gunnery was less precise but enthusiastic, filling the sky with enough plasma fire to discourage pursuit. And Vegeta stood in the center of it all, hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with cold calculation. They broke through the cloud layer traveling at speeds that would have torn apart a less sturdy vessel. The landscape of Namek spread below them, endless rolling plains of blue grass, crystalline lakes that reflected the three suns, and scattered villages of distinctive domed buildings. There, Vegeta pointed to a series of jagged mountain ranges in the eastern hemisphere. Set us down in those canyons. Natural cover, hard to search, easy to defend. The ship practically fell the last 1,000 feet, Nappa wrestling with controls that screamed in protest. They hit the ground hard enough to crack several supports, skidded through a narrow canyon, and came to rest wedged between two cliff faces. Silence fell, broken only by the ship's cooling systems and the distant sound of Namekian wildlife. Everyone alive? Nappa asked, running diagnostics. Unfortunately, Raditz muttered, extracting himself from his harness with shaking hands. What kind of landing was that? The kind that doesn't get us killed by orbital bombardment, Nappa replied. The ship's functional but barely. We're not leaving Namek in this thing. We're not leaving Namek period, Vegeta said, already moving toward the exit ramp. Not until Frisia's dead or we are. Gear up. We need to scout the area and find out exactly what we're dealing with. They emerged into Namek's perpetual daylight to find a world unlike anything they'd experienced. The three suns created strange shadows and an omnipresent warmth that was pleasant rather than oppressive. The air smelled clean, almost sweet, carrying hints of vegetation and water. Birds, or something bird-like, circled overhead, calling to each other in melodic tones. It's so peaceful, Raditz said, sounding almost disturbed by the concept. Won't be for long. Vegeta closed his eyes, extending his senses. Even without sophisticated equipment, a trained warrior could feel key signatures, the life force that animated all living beings, and what he felt made his expression darken. Multiple strong power levels. Some of them are moving fast, searching. And there. He pointed northwest. That's Frisia. I'd recognize that cold emptiness anywhere. How far? Nappa asked. Far enough that he's not an immediate threat. But there are others. Closer. Vegeta's eyes snapped open. 3 signatures approaching fast. Strong ones? We're about to have company. They took defensive positions behind rock formations, suppressing their own key signatures to near invisibility. It was a technique they perfected during years of hiding, not fighting, but survival. Sometimes Vegeta hated how good they'd gotten at hiding. The approaching signatures resolved into 3 figures flying through the canyon at high speed. They weren't Frisia Force soldiers. Their uniforms were different, orange and blue, and they radiated a type of energy that made Vegeta's instincts scream danger. The lead figure was tall and powerfully built, with wild black hair that defied gravity. His energy signature was wrong. Not Crimson Key, not Frost Core, but something else entirely. It flowed rather than burned, adapted rather than overwhelmed. And it was strong, stronger than anyone Vegeta had felt since his father. Spread out and search. The man called to his companions. Gohan, check the eastern ridge. Krillin, take the western approach. I'll scout the canyon floor. Whoever crashed that ship might need help. They were looking for survivors. Trying to help. The concept was so foreign to Vegeta's recent experience that he actually hesitated before stepping out from cover. We don't need help, he announced, letting just enough Crimson Key flare to make his presence unmistakable. But if you're enemies of Frisia, we might be able to work together. The 3 warriors spun, instantly on guard. The lead man's energy surged, that strange flowing power wrapping around him like a second skin. Up close, Vegeta could see he was Saiyan, or at least partly so. The tail was gone, but the features, the build, the way he moved, all suggested Saiyan heritage. Easy there, the man said, hands raised in a placating gesture. We're not looking for a fight. I'm Goku. These are my friends, Gohan and Krillin. We're here to stop Frisia from getting the Dragon Balls. Goku. Vegeta tested the name, and something clicked in his memory. Son Goku. The low-class warrior who was sent to Earth as an infant. I read your file in the old databases. You were supposed to conquer that planet. I was supposed to do a lot of things, Goku replied with an easy smile that somehow made Vegeta's teeth clench. Didn't work out that way. But you're Saiyan too, right? That energy signature is unmistakable, even if it's different from mine. I am Prince Vegeta, rightful heir to the throne of all Saiyans. He ignored Raditz' subtle warning gesture. Anonymity was no longer an option, not if they wanted allies against Frisia. These are my companions, Nappa and Raditz. We've come to ensure Frisia pays for what he did to our people. The smaller one, Krillin, a human from the looks of him, paled slightly. Wait, you're the Prince Vegeta? But that means, you saw planet Vegeta get destroyed? I saw my father die, Vegeta said flatly. I saw my mother stay behind to help evacuate civilians. I saw our entire civilization erased in a single afternoon because one tyrant decided we were inconvenient. So yes, I saw it get destroyed. And I've spent the last 8 years preparing to return the favor. Gohan, who looked young, perhaps 9 or 10, studied Vegeta with curious eyes. You're not much older than me. But your power, it feels different. Dangerous. Crimson Key. Vegeta allowed his scarlet blaze to manifest briefly, flames wreathing his arms. The traditional Saiyan power system. We channel emotion and willpower into physical force. What you're using, that flowing energy, I've never encountered it before. Spirit flow, Goku explained, and his own aura became visible, not flames, but a gentle golden glow that pulsed rhythmically. It's an earth martial arts technique. We learn to sense and manipulate the life energy in all things, then flow with it rather than against it. It's about harmony, balance, adaptation. Sounds weak, Vegeta said dismissively, though internally he was fascinated. A completely different power system, one that operated on entirely opposite principles from Crimson Key. Why don't we test that? Goku's smile widened, and there was something in his expression, not malice, but genuine excitement. I'd love to see how our styles match up. Besides, if we're going to work together, we should know each other's capabilities. Every instinct Vegeta possessed screamed that this was a challenge he couldn't back down from. His pride, battered and buried under 8 years of survival instinct, roared back to life. Here was a warrior, a fellow Saiyan, even if he didn't seem to realize the significance of that, offering him a real fight. Not a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds, not a quick assassination in some back alley, but an actual test of skill. Nappa, Raditz, stand down, Vegeta ordered. This is between warriors. They moved to an open area of the canyon floor, putting distance between themselves and their companions. Vegeta rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar heat of Crimson Key building in his core. Across from him, Goku settled into a relaxed stance that somehow managed to be both casual and perfectly balanced. Ready when you are, Goku said. Vegeta didn't bother with a response. He attacked. His opening move was pure Saiyan combat doctrine, overwhelming speed and power designed to end fights quickly. He closed the distance in a fraction of a second, his fist trailing crimson flames, aimed at Goku's midsection with enough force to shatter stone. Goku wasn't there. He'd shifted slightly, just enough that Vegeta's strike passed through empty air. The counterattack came from an unexpected angle, a simple palm strike to Vegeta's shoulder that somehow redirected all his momentum, sending him stumbling past his target. Interesting, Goku said mildly. Your power burns hot, but you're predictable. You fight like you're angry at the world. I am angry at the world, Vegeta snarled, recovering and launching into a combination that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Jab, cross, roundhouse kick, follow up with an elbow strike. Each movement enhanced by Crimson Key, each impact trailing fire. But Goku flowed around them like water around stones. His spirit flow responded to each attack by finding the path of least resistance, never meeting force with force but instead redirecting, absorbing, channeling. It was infuriating. You're not even trying, Vegeta accused, his scarlet blaze intensifying as his frustration grew. Stop playing around and fight me properly. I'm not playing around, Goku replied, and for the first time, his expression grew serious. I'm showing you the difference between fighting with anger and fighting with purpose. Your technique is excellent, your power is incredible for your age. But you're letting emotion control you instead of channeling it constructively. Emotion is the source of my power. Vegeta drove forward with renewed fury, each strike hitting harder, faster, hotter. The canyon floor beneath them began to crack from the heat. Crimson Key is fueled by what we feel. Without that, we're nothing. Then let me show you what spirit flow can do. Goku's aura flared, and suddenly he was the one attacking. but his strikes were nothing like Vegeta's aggressive assault. Each movement was precise, economical, flowing seamlessly into the next. It was like fighting water that had learned to punch. Vegeta blocked, parried, dodged, but barely. Every time he thought he'd adapted to the pattern, Goku shifted slightly, found a new angle, exploited an opening Vegeta didn't know he'd left, and all without that golden aura even flickering. A sweep took Vegeta's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up with his hands already glowing crimson. Crimson Lance! He'd been developing this technique for years. Concentrated ki shaped into a piercing projectile rather than a diffuse blast. 3 lances of compressed flame shot toward Goku at speeds that blurred the air. Goku's response was to simply catch them. His hands glowed with golden spirit flow, and the crimson lances dissolved like ice in hot water, their energy dissipating harmlessly. How? Vegeta demanded, climbing to his feet. That's not possible. Those lances are solid ki, compressed to. Solid to you, Goku interrupted. But to spirit flow, all energy is just energy. I can sense its flow, its structure, and disrupt it. It's not about overpowering your technique. It's about understanding it and finding its weakness. Vegeta's hands clenched into fists. This was wrong. Everything about this fight was wrong. He had more raw power. He could feel it. His Tier 2 scarlet blaze burned hotter than Goku's gentle golden aura. But none of it mattered because this infuriating warrior fought like he was having a conversation instead of a battle. You're holding back, Vegeta accused. I can feel it. That's not your full power. You're right. Goku's expression softened. But neither of us is here to kill each other, are we? We're here to test our strength, to learn from each other. If I used my full power against you, it wouldn't be a fair fight. You're 13 years old, Vegeta. You're incredibly strong for your age, but don't patronize me. Vegeta's scarlet blaze exploded outward, the heat wave so intense that everyone watching had to take several steps back. I've been fighting since I was 5 years old. I've killed warriors twice your size. I've survived 8 years in exile, hunted by every bounty hunter in the galaxy. Don't you dare treat me like a child. And there it was, the emotional surge he'd been chasing. Rage, yes, but also pride, determination, and something deeper. The need to prove himself, to show that he wasn't just some refugee prince playing at being a warrior. He was Vegeta, heir to the greatest warrior race in the universe, and he would not be pitted. His crimson ki responded to that emotional cocktail, and suddenly it was changing. The scarlet flames deepened, intensified, taking on a darker hue at their core. The heat wasn't just external anymore. It was burning through his very cells, reforging him from the inside out. Oh, Goku said, eyes widening. You're transforming. Vegeta barely heard him. All his focus was internal now, on the sensation of his ki breaking through some invisible barrier. This was it. This was the threshold his father had described. Tier 3. The Crimson Inferno. But it hurt. Stars above, it hurt. Like every muscle in his body was tearing and rebuilding simultaneously. Like his bones were being dipped in molten metal. The scarlet blaze wasn't enough to contain what he was becoming. It needed more, demanded more. Don't fight it. Nappa's voice cut through the pain. Let it transform you. This is what you've been training for, Vegeta screamed. Not from pain, though there was plenty of that. But from defiance, from rage at a universe that had taken everything from him, from sheer stubborn refusal to be limited by what others thought he should be capable of at his age. The scarlet blaze shattered like glass, and from its fragments, something new was born. Crimson Inferno. The flames around Vegeta's body darkened to a deep, almost wine-red color, so hot they distorted the very air. Where scarlet blaze had been external, coating his skin like armor, the Crimson Inferno burned from within, visible through his skin like he'd swallowed a star. His eyes glowed the same deep crimson, and when he breathed, small embers escaped his mouth. This was Tier 3. This was the power that only elite Saiyan warriors ever achieved, and Vegeta had reached it at 13 years old. Incredible, Gohan breathed. His energy signature just tripled. Maybe quadrupled. Vegeta looked at his hands, watched the crimson flames dance between his fingers with a life of their own. Everything felt different, sharper, clearer, more real. He could feel the ki of every living thing in a 100-mile radius. could sense Frisia's cold presence like a wound in the fabric of the world, could finally understand what his father had tried to tell him that last day. Power wasn't just strength. It was awareness. Control. The ability to shape reality through sheer force of will. Thank you, Vegeta said quietly, looking at Goku. If you hadn't pushed me, hadn't made me feel inadequate, I might not have broken through. I wasn't trying to make you feel inadequate, Goku protested. I know what you were doing. And it worked. Vegeta allowed the Crimson Inferno to fade, pulling the power back inside himself. It was easier than maintaining Scarlet Blaze had been. More natural, like the energy was now a part of him rather than something he had to consciously control. But don't think this changes anything. I'm still going to surpass you, Goku grinned. I'd be disappointed if you didn't try. Now come on, we have a tyrant to stop and Dragon Balls to protect. We can compare techniques later. As they regrouped with the others, Vegeta felt something he hadn't experienced in 8 years. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but actual optimism that they might succeed. Goku's power was formidable, his spirit flow offered capabilities that Crimson Ki couldn't match, and if they worked together, maybe, just maybe, they could actually win. The alliance was uneasy but functional. Goku's group had come to Namek in a ship provided by one of Earth's benefactors, and they'd brought a young Namekian named Dend who served as both guide and translator. The plan was simple in concept, difficult in execution. Gather the Dragon Balls before Frieza could, wish for whatever would give them the best chance against him, then face the tyrant on their terms. There's just one problem, Krillin said as they flew toward the nearest Namekian village. Frieza's forces are systematically attacking every village, taking the Dragon Balls by force. The Namekians are peaceful people. They're not equipped to fight back. Then we fight back for them, Vegeta said coldly. Every warrior we eliminate is one less between us and Frieza. Besides, attacking supply lines and creating chaos. That's what we do best. That's your plan? Gohan looked concerned. Just attack everything Frieza-related until we reach him? Do you have a better one? Actually, yeah. We split up. One group goes after the Dragon Balls, the other runs interference against Frieza's forces. We coordinate via Scouter. What do you guys use for communication? Vegeta tapped the side of his head where a compact Scouter sat, far more advanced than the old military models. We've upgraded our equipment during our exile. These can communicate across planetary distances, detect power levels, and translate most known languages. Perfect. So Goku, you're the strongest. You should be on Dragon Ball duty with Den to help locate them. Vegeta, Nappa, and Raditz can run interference. Krillin and I will provide support wherever it's needed most. It was a sound tactical plan, which annoyed Vegeta because he hadn't thought of it first. Fine. But understand this, if I encounter Frieza before you do, I'm not waiting for backup. 8 years I've prepared for this. I won't miss my chance because you want to coordinate our assault. Fair enough, Goku said easily. Just try not to get killed before we can help. I'd like to see how strong you get once you master that new form of yours. They split up, and Vegeta led his small team toward the largest concentration of Frieza Force energy signatures. According to the Scouter readings, a full squad was currently assaulting a village about 30 miles to the east, probably trying to extract information about Dragon Ball locations from the locals. Remember, Vegeta said as they approached, we hit hard and fast. Disable their communications first, then eliminate anyone who looks important. The regular soldiers aren't worth our time. Since when do you care about sparing enemies? Raditz asked. I don't. But killing grunts won't accomplish our objective. We want to draw out the elite troops, the ones Frieza actually values. Make him think we're a serious threat. They crested a ridge overlooking the village and found organized brutality in progress. Namekian villagers, tall, green-skinned humanoids with antennae, were being herded into the village square by soldiers in white armor. A larger figure, clearly the squad commander, was interrogating the village elder while subordinates ransacked buildings. Standard terror tactics, Nappa growled. Torture one, terrify the rest. Not anymore. Vegeta's Crimson Inferno ignited, controlled flames wrapping around his body. Nappa, take the left flank. Raditz, right? I'll hit them from above. On my mark, now! He dropped from the ridge like a meteor, slamming into the village square with enough force to crater the ground. The shockwave knocked soldiers off their feet. Before they could react, Vegeta was among them, moving with speed that made his previous combat style look sluggish by comparison. Tier 3 wasn't just more power, it was qualitatively different. His reflexes were sharper, his perception expanded, his control absolute. He could feel the flow of battle like a living thing, anticipate movements before they happened, strike with surgical precision. 3 soldiers went down before anyone managed to raise their weapons. Nappa crashed through a building, his own scarlet blaze blazing, laughing with the joy of open combat after years of skulking in shadows. Raditz was more cautious but no less effective, his energy blasts picking off targets Vegeta and Nappa left exposed. What the who are you? The squad commander demanded, his scouter frantically beeping as it tried to assess their power levels. We're Saiyans, Vegeta said simply, grabbing the commander by the throat and lifting him off the ground. And you made a mistake coming here, Saiyans? The commander's eyes widened. Impossible! Lord Frieza wiped out the Saiyans 8 years ago. You're all dead, not all of us. Vegeta's grip tightened, and crimson flames began to spread up his arm toward the struggling soldier. And we've spent every day since learning how to kill your master. You want to help us with that? I don't know anything. I'm just a squad leader. I follow orders. Then you're useless. Vegeta dropped him and turned to the Namekians, who were watching with a mixture of fear and hope. Which of you is the elder? An old Namekian stepped forward, his robes torn but his bearing dignified despite the circumstances. I am Muri, elder of this village. Are you here to help us? We're here to kill Frieza, Vegeta corrected. If helping you accomplishes that, then yes. Your Dragon Balls. How many does Frieza have? 4, Muri said quietly. He took them from 4 villages before reaching ours. The others are hidden, but he has a device that can detect their energy. It's only a matter of time. Then we don't have much time. Vegeta's scouter chirped with an incoming communication. What? Vegeta, it's Goku. We've got a problem. 3 extremely powerful signatures just appeared on my scouter. They're heading your way fast. I think Frieza sent his elite guard to investigate the attack on that village. Good. Vegeta smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. That's exactly what we wanted. How powerful are we talking? Higher than anything I've felt except Frieza himself. One of them is weird. The signature keeps changing, like they're transforming or something. Can you reach us in time? Not before they arrive. Maybe 5 minutes behind them. Can you hold out that long? Vegeta looked at Nappa and Raditz, both of whom were breathing hard but grinning with battlelust. Looked at the Namekian villagers cowering in fear. Looked at his hands, still wreathed in the deep crimson flames of Tier 3. We'll manage. Just get here before the real fun starts. And Goku? Don't interfere unless it looks like we're about to die. I need to test this new power against worthy opponents. You're crazy, you know that? I'm Saiyan. It's the same thing. Vegeta cut the communication and turned to his companions. Elite troops inbound. This is what we train for. Remember, we don't have to win, just survive long enough to learn their capabilities. If it looks hopeless, we retreat and regroup. Since when do Saiyans retreat? Nappa asked. Since extinction became a real possibility. Pride is worth dying for. Stupidity isn't. Vegeta rolled his shoulders, feeling the crimson inferno settle into a steady burn rather than the explosive manifestation he'd used during the village assault. Besides, retreating now means we get to come back stronger later. I'm playing the long game. The 3 warriors took defensive positions around the village square, forming a triangle that would let them support each other while preventing flanking maneuvers. The Namekians wisely retreated into their buildings, leaving the battlefield clear. They didn't have to wait long. 3 energy signatures appeared on their scouters, approaching at speeds that would have been impressive even by Saiyan standards. Then 3 figures dropped from the sky to land in formation before them. The first was a large, pink-skinned alien with horns and a brutish build. His power signature was straightforward, raw strength without much finesse. The second was smaller, purple-skinned, with a round head and a nervous demeanor that didn't match the intensity of his ki. The third made Vegeta's instincts scream danger. He was tall, green-skinned, with orange sections that might have been biological armor. His features were sharp, aristocratic, and his eyes held an intelligence that the others lacked. But it was his power signature that was truly disturbing. It kept fluctuating, rising and falling in a pattern that suggested multiple forms, multiple levels of strength. Well, the green one said, his voice cultured and mocking. Lord Frisia was right. There are surviving Saiyans. How delightfully unexpected. Who are you? Vegeta demanded, though his scouter was already providing answers. These were three of Frisia's most trusted warriors, Dodoria, Zarbon, and I am Zarbon, chief advisor to Lord Frisia and commander of his personal guard. These are my associates, Dodoria and Shui. Zarbon's smile was like a knife. And you must be the famous Prince Vegeta. You look smaller than I expected. I get that a lot. Vegeta's crimson inferno flared brighter. Usually right before I prove size doesn't matter. How quaint. You've even developed some backbone during your exile. Zarbon's power signature began to rise. But bravery and skill are not the same thing, little prince. You're about to learn the difference. The three elite warriors spread out, mirroring the Saiyans' formation. For a moment, the canyon was silent except for the whistle of wind and the crackle of various energy signatures. Then Dodoria charged, and the real battle began. The pink alien was everything Vegeta had expected, strong, durable, and about as subtle as an orbital bombardment. His opening move was a massive energy blast that carved a trench through the village square. Nappa met it with his own scarlet blaze, the two attacks colliding in an explosion that rattled teeth and shattered windows. Mine! Nappa roared, already closing with Dodoria in the kind of straightforward brawl both warriors clearly preferred. That left Shui for Raditz and Zarbon for Vegeta. Shui attacked with energy blasts and rapid-fire strikes that forced Raditz on the defensive immediately. The long-haired warrior was outmatched but holding his ground, using superior technique to compensate for the power gap. Vegeta barely registered any of it. His entire focus was on Zarbon, who had yet to move but whose power signature was still rising. Impressive, Zarbon said conversationally. You've reached Tier 3 at such a young age. Your father would be proud. Of course, he reached it at 17, so you're still 4 years behind his record. The words were calculated to sting, and they worked. Vegeta's flames burned hotter. My father was killed by a coward who brought an army instead of fighting honorably, Vegeta snarled. Don't speak his name. Honorably? Zarbon laughed. Honor is what the weak used to feel better about losing. Lord Frisia understands this. Power is the only thing that matters in this universe. Everything else, honor, dignity, pride, those are just pretty words people use to avoid admitting they're not strong enough. Then let me show you real power. Vegeta attacked, his Tier 3 speed making him a crimson blur. But Zarbon was ready. He blocked the first strike, parried the second, and caught Vegeta's wrist on the third. His grip was like iron. Not bad. But you're still thinking like a Saiyan, all aggression, no strategy. Allow me to demonstrate proper technique. Zarbon's counterattack was beautiful in its efficiency. He used Vegeta's own momentum against him, threw him off balance, then delivered a knee strike to the midsection that drove the air from Vegeta's lungs. Before Vegeta could recover, Zarbon was behind him, delivering a blow to the base of his skull that sent him crashing into the ground hard enough to leave a crater. The problem with Crimson Ki, Zarbon continued, not even breathing hard, is that it makes you predictable. All that emotion, all that passion, it blinds you to tactical opportunities. You're so busy burning bright that you forget to actually think. Vegeta climbed out of the crater, spitting blood. His Crimson Inferno hadn't wavered, but his confidence had taken a hit. Zarbon was stronger than expected, and worse, he was skilled. This wasn't going to be the straightforward test Vegeta had hoped for. You're holding back, Vegeta accused. I can feel it. That's not your full power. Very perceptive. Yes, I have a transformation. Would you like to see it? Zarbon's smile widened. Or would you prefer to surrender now, save yourself the humiliation? Show me. Vegeta settled back into his combat stance, ignoring the pain in his ribs. I want to see exactly what I'm up against. As you wish. Zarbon's power signature exploded upward. His body began to change. Muscles bulging, features becoming more monstrous, his elegant appearance twisting into something that was all predatory strength. When the transformation finished, he looked nothing like the cultured advisor who had been speaking moments before. This was a beast wrapped in scales and fury, easily twice his previous size, and his power had increased proportionally. This, Zarbon's voice was deeper now, rougher, is my true form. I usually avoid using it, so ugly, so crude. But for the prince of an extinct race, I'll make an exception. He moved, and Vegeta barely had time to raise a defensive guard. The impact sent him flying backward, crashing through a Namekian building. Before he could recover, Zarbon was there again, delivering a combination that would have killed a lesser warrior. Vegeta's Crimson Inferno raged, burning away the damage almost as fast as it was inflicted. But he was losing ground. Zarbon's transformed state was simply too powerful, too fast, too skilled. Every exchange left Vegeta with new injuries, new deficits to overcome. He could hear Nappa and Raditz struggling with their own opponents. Could feel Goku's energy signature approaching but still too far away. Could taste blood in his mouth and feel the beginning of despair trying to take root. No, he hadn't survived 8 years in exile just to fall here. He hadn't broken through to Tier 3 just to be beaten by some transformed lackey. He was Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, heir to a throne built on the bones of 1,000 conquered worlds. He would not lose. Vegeta's Crimson Inferno surged, and he felt something inside him shift. Not another transformation. He wasn't ready for Tier 4 yet, not even close. But within Tier 3 itself, there were levels. Depths of power that came not just from raw strength but from understanding, from pushing yourself beyond what you thought possible. His flames condensed, becoming more controlled but somehow more intense. The heat didn't decrease, but it focused, becoming a tool rather than just a weapon. Crimson Lance! Vegeta thrust both hands forward, and twin spears of concentrated ki shot toward Zarbon with speeds that made his earlier attempts look sluggish. Zarbon dodged the first, but the second caught him in the shoulder, punching through his transformed hide and drawing actual blood. He looked down at the wound in surprise. Impossible. My transformed state should be immune to unrefined ki, yes. Vegeta was grinning now, despite his injuries, despite the disadvantage. But I've spent 8 years learning to compress and focus my crimson ki. Those lances aren't just energy blasts. They're solid constructs, sharp enough to pierce any defense. He attacked again, this time mixing physical strikes with ki techniques. Zarbon was stronger, but Vegeta was adapting, learning the rhythm of the monster's movements. Every exchange taught him something new. Every wound he received showed him where his defenses were weak. Every near miss refined his technique. This was what his father had meant. This was how Saiyans grew strong, not in comfortable training sessions, but in actual combat where losing meant death. Their bodies, their ki, their very souls learned and adapted faster under pressure than any amount of peaceful training could achieve. You're improving, Zarbon admitted grudgingly, wiping green blood from his mouth. But improvement isn't enough. You need time to master this new level of power, and I'm not going to give it to you. He lunged, faster than before, and this time Vegeta couldn't dodge. Couldn't block. Couldn't do anything but take the hit, and pray his Crimson Inferno was strong enough to keep him alive. The impact sent him crashing into the canyon wall with enough force to crack stone. His vision blurred. His Crimson Inferno flickered. For a moment, just one terrible moment, he felt death reaching for him. Then a new energy signature blazed into existence right beside him, and a familiar voice said, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Mind if I cut in?" Goku had arrived. To be continued in the next section due to length. The golden aura of spirit flow lit up the canyon like a second sun as Goku stepped between Vegeta and Zarbon. The Earthrays Science power was fully manifested now, no longer holding back, and it was formidable enough to make even Zarbon's transformed state look twice. "You must be one of Frisia's elite," Goku said, his tone almost friendly despite the circumstances. "That's quite a transformation you've got there. And you must be the Saiyan raised on Earth," Zarbon replied, quickly reassessing the situation. "Lord Frisia mentioned you might appear. He's quite interested in seeing how Earth's techniques compare to traditional Saiyan power. Well, let's not keep him waiting then. Goku's smile never wavered, but his eyes were serious. Though I should warn you, I've gotten a lot stronger since Frieza destroyed planet Vegeta, as have we all. Zarbon charged, his monstrous form moving with deceptive grace. What followed was a display that made Vegeta's earlier fight look like a training exercise. Goku and Zarbon moved at speeds that were difficult to track even with enhanced senses. Every exchange sent shockwaves rippling through the canyon. Energy blasts carved new geography into Namek's surface. But the most striking thing was the difference in their fighting styles. Zarbon's approach was direct, powerful, using his transformed strength to overwhelm opponents. Goku's spirit flow was something else entirely. It adapted to each attack, redirected force, found weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. Vegeta watched from where he'd collapsed against the canyon wall, his crimson inferno slowly healing his injuries. He could see it now, the fundamental difference between their power systems. Crimson Ki was like a roaring fire, consuming everything in its path. Spirit Flow was like water, finding the path of least resistance but inevitably wearing down even the strongest stone. You're strong, Zarbon admitted, blocking a kick that would have taken his head off. Stronger than I expected. But Lord Frieza is on another level entirely. Even if you defeat me, you'll never. I'm not trying to defeat Frieza alone, Goku interrupted, his counterattack forcing Zarbon back several steps. That's the difference between you guys and us. You serve a tyrant who rules through fear. We fight alongside friends who make us stronger. Your way might seem more efficient, but it's also lonelier. And in the long run? Friendship beats tyranny every time. It was such a naive, earnest statement that Vegeta would have laughed if he had the breath for it. But watching Goku fight, seeing how his spirit flow responded to support from Gohan and Krillin, who had arrived to help Nappa and Raditz with their opponents, he had to admit there might be something to it. Crimson Ki burned brightest in isolation, fueled by personal emotion and individual will. But spirit flow seemed to amplify when warriors fought together, their energies harmonizing and resonating. It was a completely different philosophy of power. Vegeta! Gohan dropped down beside him, looking worried. Are you okay? That looked like a really hard hit. I'm fine, Vegeta lied, trying to stand. His legs weren't cooperating yet. Just need a moment. Here, let me help. Gohan placed a hand on Vegeta's shoulder, and something strange happened. A trickle of golden energy, spirit flow, flowed from Gohan into Vegeta's system. It didn't try to replace his Crimson Ki but instead supported it, like adding kindling to a dying fire. The effect was immediate. Vegeta's Crimson Inferno stabilized, burned brighter, and his injuries began healing faster. Within seconds he could stand. Within a minute, he was combat ready again. What did you do? Vegeta demanded. Energy sharing, Gohan explained. It's a basic spirit flow technique. We can transfer life energy between warriors to help with healing and recovery. Can't Saiyans do that with their Crimson Ki? No. We can't. Vegeta stared at his hands, feeling the lingering warmth of Gohan's energy mixing with his own flames. Crimson Ki is personal. Individual. Sharing it would mean weakening yourself. Spirit flow is the opposite. The more people who share it, the stronger everyone becomes. Gohan smiled, and despite himself, Vegeta felt some of his automatic hostility toward the younger warrior fade. Maybe that's something you could learn. Combining your power system with ours. Before Vegeta could respond, Goku's voice rang out across the canyon. Guys. Frieza's coming. I can feel his energy signature moving this way fast. Everything stopped. Zarbon disengaged from Goku immediately, his monstrous face showing something that might have been relief. Dodoria and Shui backed away from their opponents, clearly eager to avoid fighting when their master was about to arrive. You've done well, Zarbon said, his transformation beginning to reverse. Better than expected, actually. But this was just a test. Lord Frieza wanted to assess your capabilities before dealing with you personally. And now he has all the information he needs. The cold presence that was Frieza's frost core grew closer, and Vegeta felt ice water replace the blood in his veins. He'd spent 8 years preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, he realized with sickening clarity that he wasn't ready. Tier 3 wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. We need to retreat, he said, hating every word but knowing they were necessary. Regroup, plan an actual strategy. Fighting him now would be suicide. For once, we agree, Goku said, his own expression serious as he monitored Frieza's approaching signature. But we'll need to come back. He's getting close to gathering all the Dragon Balls. If he makes his wish before we can stop him, then we make sure he doesn't. Vegeta forced himself to stand straight despite his injuries, despite his fear. We retreat, but only far enough to plan properly. This ends today, one way or another. They fled the village, carrying wounded Namekians with them, as Frieza's presence drew closer. Behind them, Zarbon and his companions watched them go, making no attempt to pursue. Why would they? The real hunt was about to begin, and this time, Frieza himself would be the hunter. As they flew toward a secure location, Vegeta looked at his hands, still wreathed in crimson flames, still powerful, still inadequate. He'd broken through to Tier 3. He'd learned that other power systems existed with completely different strengths. He'd even begun to understand that maybe, just maybe, fighting alongside others could make him stronger rather than weaker. But none of that changed the fundamental equation. Frieza had destroyed his world, killed his parents, scattered his people to the winds. And when they finally faced each other, when the reckoning came, Vegeta would need to be stronger than he'd ever imagined possible. Tier 4. Ruby Tempest. The level his father had achieved. That had to be his next goal. And maybe if the universe was feeling generous, he'd reach it before Frieza killed him. The three sons of Namek began their slow descent toward the horizon, and Prince Vegeta flew through alien skies, preparing for a battle 8 years in the making. Behind him, the first clash between Crimson Ki and Spirit Flow had ended in stalemate. Ahead, a tyrant waited with power that dwarfed them all. The real war was just beginning.